Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Flux Footwear Adapt High Top Trainer. So 3 pros that I have with the Adapt High Top Trainer is number 1, if you're on the market for a high top shoe for working out that has a flexible sole construction, this can be a really good option to look into. So a lot of the high top shoes that I love training in, like the Vans Skate High, the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star high top model, and like the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid, they're a little thicker through the sole. This model has a lot more articulation, so if you do like a more flexible sole construction and you still want that higher boot construction, I think the Adapt High Top Trainer can be a really good shoe to fill that void. The second pro that I have with this model is overall the upper tends to be pretty dang durable. So we have a ripstop upper construction in this shoe, and for the most part it's done a pretty good job with abrasion resistance. Also with rope climbs and things like that, this model has done an okay job as well for that. Now with the sole construction being so flexible, you might not necessarily like how it feels for that context, but regarding the shoe's overall upper construction durability, I think this model should last a while, and I also like this shoe for working out and daily wear for that reason. The third pro that I like with this model is that it has minimal branding and it looks pretty good in a more casual context. So I like that you can train in this shoe but then wear it out and about. So I do think if you're wanting that high top shoe that can be worn for working out, that has a zero drop construction, nice flexible sole, gets you a little bit closer to the ground, that also looks pretty good, this model can fill that void because it has a nice range in those contexts. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the Adapt High Top Trainer. So 3 cons that I could see folks having with the Adapt High Top Trainer is number 1, they run pretty dang narrow. And so one of my gripes with Flux is actually that I think their branding regarding like their overall barefoot shoe construction, because I think when you hear that you think more width, but like looking at this model compared to like a Vivo Barefoot Geo Racer Knit here, like it's pretty easy to see the differences in toe box width and construction. So despite its sole being nice and flexible and similar-esque to a minimalist shoe, you're not gonna have the same level of width. The second drawback that I could see folks having with the Adapt High Top Trainer is if you're buying the shoe and you want a truly minimalist model that gets you super close to the ground, this might not be your best bet. This model does have a slightly higher stack height, so you're not gonna get as much ground feel and ground feedback with this shoe. So if you do invest in this shoe, once again, just understand that like it's like an in-between between a true minimalist shoe and like a more traditional shoe with a thicker midsole. So it does do a really good job in that like transitional footwear context, but it's not a true minimalist shoe. So if you're buying the shoe, I would say expect it to have a slightly higher stack height. The third con that I have with this model is the Adapt sole construction. So essentially in the insole of this shoe, and this is similar to the other Flux Footwear low top model, the Adapt Trainer, you have this like bumpier texture. Now, I don't dislike this. However, it can be a little bit off-putting at times. And so if you don't like any form of like texture or bumpiness on the insole or sock liner of your shoe, that would definitely be something to think about. I think most folks do kind of get used to it and they adapt to it, and it does kind of feel good at times, but it is a little bit off-putting in certain contexts. So for example, if I'm doing heavy deadlifts, I actually don't like how it feels, and I'll talk about that in my performance section, but that could be something that I could see being hit or miss for some individuals, just because it's a different feel than a smoother sock liner slash insole in most models. But now let's talk about the performance of the Adapt High Top Trainer. To break down the performance of the Adapt High Top Trainer, I'm gonna break this section to a few different parts. I'll talk about the shoe's performance for lifting, versatile training, shorter runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, the shoe does a pretty good job, and honestly, this is the training vertical where I think you'll get the most out of this shoe, especially for folks who do love high top trainers in the gym or high top shoes in the gym at that. This model works decently well on different surfaces because of tread patterning. It gives you a nice level of grip. On top of that, I do like the overall sole flexibility. So for things like lunges and split squats where you do want more flex to the toe, I like how well this sole moves. Now, where does this shoe fall short for lifting? Number 1 is with its width. I find it to be a little bit uncomfortable at times, and I would highly suggest either going with a super thin no-show sock or going barefoot in the shoe if you do want to get a little bit more out of the width of the shoe, just because I think you will feel a little bit limited if you're wearing a thicker sock and you have like a medium to wider width foot. The second area where I think the shoe can fall short for lifting at times is for very specific contexts. For example, like if you're deadlifting heavy, I don't really like the Adapt sole feeling. I almost felt like I was kind of like sliding around on that bumpier texture, so I wasn't the biggest fan of that, especially when doing higher rep deadlift sets. So that would be something to think about with this model as well, if you are very specific with your training in that context. For versatile training, the shoe does a pretty good job, and honestly, I think it performs just as well as like a Noble high top trainer or even a GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid, and it performs better than a Converse or Skate High, where you're not getting as much articulation, as much of like a versatile feeling shoe shoe, and where you're not getting as much of like a versatile feel with the sole construction. So if you want to use this shoe for cross training and some versatile style workouts where you're basically lifting but then blending in some jumping and some like sled work and whatnot, the shoe can work. Now this upper can feel a little bit heavy during that break-in process, but I think after a few weeks of wear, this should start being a little bit more malleable too. So for the context of versatile training, the shoe should do a decent job for a high top shoe. Is it going to be the best for like athletic style workouts? Not necessarily, but for like just general versatile training where you're blending a little bit of like jumping or some dynamic movements in with your lifting sessions, this shoe should work just fine. In the context of shorter runs, I would say probably pass on this shoe. Generally, you don't want to typically run in a high top shoe, and I think with the shoe's narrower toe box and its zero drop construction, I'm not sure it's going to resonate with most folks regarding running mechanics. So for short runs, I would say probably pass on this model. For daily wear, I thought the shoe did a pretty good job, and that's for two key reasons. Number one, I like the appearance of this model, and two, I do like the level of flexibility you get with its sole. You might find that this upper is a little bit heavy, it might create a little bit of rub, and because it does run narrow, you can't really wear like thick long socks to kind of help mitigate this, because then the shoe feels super snug. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, dang it, I kind of got to suffer through this to get through it. So that is a knock against this shoe's boot construction, but once they break in, they should feel fine. Like you can see like back here on my boot, it's a little bit worn and like there's a little bit of a black tint to it. This doesn't rub as much anymore and it kind of like flares out, which I personally like, but that was after a couple of weeks of like walking the dogs with this shoe and making sure I was like working the back of this boot with my hand to make sure it flared out. So for daily wear, the shoe works pretty good. So in the context of lifting, this model works pretty dang well for recreational lifting, with a couple of areas where it does fall short. For versatile training, I think this shoe should work fine for most like general cross training settings. For short runs, I would say pass on the shoe, and for daily wear, this model also works really well. However, it's not the widest shoe on the market, especially if you do need more width through your toe box. When it comes to the price of the Flux Footwear Adapt High Top Trainer, you can expect to pay $139.99 USD. Now, I'm a little bit hit or miss on that price point. I'll talk about that more in my next section. So what I would suggest doing is, if you're looking into this model, definitely look around for coupons, because if you can knock the price point down to like 120, 125, I think that's a little bit more fair for what this shoe offers. All right, so now let's answer the questions of who should and who shouldn't buy the Flux Footwear Adapt High Top Trainer. So starting with who should, I think if you're somebody who likes a flatter shoe for lifting and you love high top models for training, then this shoe can work really well. And now to add on to that, if you have a narrow or medium width foot, this shoe will also fit you really well regarding your anatomical build. Also, I do think this shoe has a nice level of articulation. So for folks who like a lot of flexibility with their shoes, this is a high top trainer that I think is filling that void that other models are not currently filling. All right, so now who shouldn't invest in the Adapt High Top Trainer? I think if you have a wider foot width, you'll want to pass on this shoe, because even if you size up, I'm not convinced you'll have enough width in this model. Also, I think if you're somebody who's very particular about the feel in their shoes and you want a flat insole and you know for a fact you want that, then I would say also probably pass on the shoe, because you're not going to like the more rigid structure of the insole in this model. So overall, I think the Adapt High Top Trainer does fill a niche ask when it comes to high top training shoes, but there are definitely contexts and populations that will want to pass on this shoe due to their width and due to their insole construction. So when it comes to the sizing and fit in the Adapt High Top Trainer, I think if you are a normal size and you're not in between sizes and you have a narrow or medium width foot, you should be safe going true to size. Now, this model does not come in half sizes. If you're a half size, size up, because if you size down, this shoe is going to be way too snug for you. And if you are teetering between like a medium to wide foot, you might also want to consider sizing up in this shoe. Overall, the shoe does fit my foot pretty true, but I'm in between like that medium and wider width. And honestly, I think sizing up would have given me a little bit more of a comfortable fit to the toe box. So I think there is a population that'll go true to size with this model, but I think if you teeter towards a wider foot width, or if you're in between sizes, you might want to size up in the Adapt High Top Trainer. All right, now let's break down the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Adapt High Top Trainer. For my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.35 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 0 millimeters, and this model does not feature a removable insole. We have that Adapt sole construction inside this shoe. All right, now let's break down the construction of the Adapt High Top Trainer. So looking at the upper of this shoe, we have a ripstop upper that extends over the entirety of the shoe and the tongue. The tongue is padded, and there's a little bit of padding here at the boot as well. And then we have some synthetic overlays around the toe box, heel, and through the midfoot here. Looking at the midfoot construction, we have 8 core eyelets that go up, a loop here on the tongue for additional security. And when lacing this shoe up, I actually like going 7 eyelets up, because I like having a little bit more flex with the tongue. Granted, like you can easily wear them up like this, but I like to wear them a little bit lower because I like to slip them on, and it gives me a little bit more of a a means to do that. Looking at the sole construction of this shoe, we have a full rubber tread patterning. We do have some ridges around the entirety of this shoe's sole as well. And then we have that adapt sole tread down here. There's a lot of flex to it, so the shoe does have a nice level of flexibility. And the stack height, while being higher than a barefoot shoe, isn't the highest, so it is that in-between kind of stack height between a traditional shoe with a thicker midsole and a true barefoot shoe. Looking at the insole of the shoe, we have the adapt sole tech in here, so as you can see, it's a little bit bumpier in nature, and so that's what gives this a little bit more of a textured feel when wearing them. But overall, that kind of wraps up the construction of this model. It's rather simplistic in nature, which I personally like, but if you have additional questions on the construction of the shoe, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up my review on the Adapt High Top Trainer. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.